Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Sapphire Tech YouTube channel. My name is Pixel, and today I thought that I would take a quick look at some gameplay of the Mortal Shell beta, which is currently available on the Epic Games Store, running on our SAPPHIRE Pulse RX 5600 XT graphics card at 1080p and utilising the game's ultra quality preset. Before we take a closer look into the graphics and performance, I'd like to quickly go over Mortal Shell as a game and explain what it's all about. Put simply, Mortal Shell is a Souls-like, which means it plays an awful lot like Dark Souls, meaning that challenge and difficulty is a major cornerstone of the game's design. Combat is weighty and methodical rather than just fast hack and slash. You need to think about how you're going to attack your enemies, how you're going to defend from enemies' attacks, and you really need to plan out each combat encounter. As you'd likely expect, because as is the case with most Souls-likes, stamina management is a big part of the core experience. You'll be using it to dodge attacks as well as attacking yourself, and once you run out, you're basically a sitting duck. At least you would be if it wasn't for the game's hardened mechanic, which we'll talk about now. You see, Mortal Shell does take the opportunity to deviate from the Dark Souls formula fairly frequently. This can be seen in the way that character progression is handled, the way that the story plays out, and even the way that you handle the healing mechanics. However, none of these are handled quite as uniquely as this game's hardened mechanic. Your ability to harden basically replaces your ability to block and thus becomes one of your primary forms of defense. That is, of course, outside of dodging attacks. Your ability to harden is actually on a cooldown, which means that you can't constantly spam it out, but it has got a couple of unique advantages, such as the ability to harden during an attack. This gives you much greater control over each individual fight and even allows you to set traps where you will be in the middle of a heavy swing and then you'll harden, and then when an enemy gets into range you'll instantly hit them with everything you've got. To be completely honest, while I do find this ability incredibly interesting, I'm still kind of on the fence to if I would like to play a game built around this one specific mechanic. Not because I see anything particularly wrong with the mechanic itself, but rather I find that it kind of messes with the pacing of the combat, as does many of the design decisions in Mortal Shell. This mostly comes down to almost every single mechanic having some form of cooldown or delay in order to use. For instance, if you want to heal, there is very little in the game that will instantly heal you, so you need to kind of dip out of combat or stay safe for a prolonged period of time. You want to parry, that's fine, press the parry button, but if you mess that up, you can't just press it again in a couple of seconds, despite having additional parry charges. You have to wait until that parry animation is completely finished. On top of that, you've got your standard cooldown for abilities such as your hardened and the usage of items. Not to mention, you also need to be constantly managing your stamina and making sure you're not attacking all the time in order to make sure you've got the ability to dodge when you need it. As a result of all this stopping and starting, I found that I was not really taking full advantage of the fluid combat, which I have to admit Mortal Shell does have. The combat here does, in my honest opinion, feel better than what I've seen in Dark Souls. It's just it lacks flow, which results in you basically cheesing the system. I was constantly fighting some of the harder enemies by taking one hit, hardening, running away, doing the same again and again and again, because it worked. That said, I do believe that this could be greatly improved by simply refining the timing on some aspects of the combat and just making the game feel a little bit more responsive overall, because I have to admit, I did think that it felt a little sloppy at times. Something certainly not helped by the traditional Souls-like camera and control issues. But with that said, this is still a beta, so hopefully a lot of this stuff could be improved by full release, and I'll let you know then. Now, this video is not going to go on for too much longer, as there's really not all that much gameplay to talk about. The game only lasts for about 30 to 40 minutes depending on your own individual skill level, so I really don't want to spoil everything in the beta in case you're the kind of person that wants to check out the beta for yourself because you're a massive fan of Souls-likes. So, moving on, let's take a quick look at the visual presentation and the performance. Hopefully, one of the first things you're going to be able to notice while looking at the gameplay is that the graphics are actually fairly decent. They're by no means AAA quality, but they're definitely much better than what I would have expected from a fairly low budget title. In fact, my only real complaint with the visuals is that the game can be a little bit heavy on post-process effects at times, which can make the overall visual presentation look a little bit muddy. But yeah, apart from that, I think the game is actually rather good looking. Unfortunately, however, I don't believe that the performance really matches the visuals. While the game does look very nice indeed, especially at certain points inside when it's nice and dark and gloomy, the performance is rather low in comparison to the visuals that it's pumping out, at least in my opinion. To be completely honest, this doesn't seem to be purely down to graphical horsepower, but more down to optimization issues, and in particular, issues when it comes to transparencies, such as when there's lots of smoke and blood on the screen. On average, I would say that our frame rate mainly stuck between around 70 and 90 frames per second, but every now and again we would see dips below that 60 FPS mark, and this was happening kind of too frequently to be forgiven, to be honest. In all fairness, if you was running this game on a FreeSync enabled monitor, I think the performance would be absolutely fine. You could dip below that 60 FPS mark and not even notice it, and the game would still look, well, beautiful. The issue is, if you're targeting a 60Hz VSync, then every time you dip below that 60 FPS mark, you're going to start noticing some stutters, and it is going to affect the way that the game feels to play. I'll actually stick up a quick clip demonstrating these FPS drops now so that we can have a look at how they're going to affect the gameplay, and then we'll come back and we'll have a quick look at how we fix them. Right, as you can hopefully see, the performance there was not ideal, but thankfully, the good news is that if we simply lower the graphical setting for the shadow quality down from ultra down to high, we actually get to boost the FPS enough that we no longer drop below the 60 FPS, at least not regularly. So by dropping this setting, we should be able to get a fairly consistent 60 FPS VSync and the game will still look great. I mean, to be completely honest, I can barely tell any difference between the shadow quality setting. I mean, it's there, and we can definitely see it in the performance, but visually, unless you're doing a side-by-side comparison, the game still looks very nice on high. Now obviously we've only seen a very small chunk of gameplay here, so things could be vastly different in the full release, so I'm going to have to come back to it most likely to make sure that these findings are still relevant. I've actually got my fingers crossed that we're going to see the developers be able to optimize the game significantly and we'll be able to get much higher frame rates in general, but if not, we need to make sure that the more open sections of the game are going to be able to hold up in performance as well, otherwise this video is kind of meaningless. But based on what we've got access to today, that is pretty much all I can really give you. If you're new around here, please do slap that subscribe button and ding that bell so you get notified of our future uploads, and if you liked this video and found it helpful, then please do leave us a like. I mean, there is a dislike button that you can press as well. I just really hope that you'd let us know why you disliked it in the comment section down below so we can try and improve in future. If you've got any questions, suggestions or feedback, you can also leave those down in the comment section as well, and I will try my best to get back to you. But with that said, from myself and everybody here at the Sapphire Tech YouTube channel, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll catch you later. Bye bye.